It is now my pleasure to turn the webcast over to Dr. Peter Hurst, Associate Dean, MIT Sloan Executive Education. Dr. Hurst, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you may be in the world, and welcome to the latest in our Innovation at Work webinar series from MIT Sloan Executive Education. The Innovation at Work webinar series is the way that we introduce faculty who teach in our executive education programs and invite them to share with our executive education community around the world some of their latest research and ideas, many of which you can find being taught in our executive education programs, and other things are often very hot off the presses. And today is very much an example of that. I am joined here today by Dr. Jeanne Ross, who is the Research Director and Principal Research Scientist at MIT's Center for Information Systems Research. And I will hand over to Jeanne now to introduce the center, tell us a little bit more about herself, and then really get into the meat of today's topic, which is about digital disruption. Dr. Jeanne Ross.
Thanks so much, Peter. It's an honor to be here, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this webinar. To kick it off, I'd like to just mention that I'll be sharing with you research from the Center for Information Systems Research, which we call CISR. We are funded and supported by 93 global sponsors. You'll see their names listed here. And as always, as some of them are on the air now, I just want to thank you for your support. This particular presentation addresses the research we've been doing on digital disruption. And I have to tell you, things are so wonderfully disrupted right now that this is the best time ever to be a researcher. I'm not sure that's as true about the best time ever to be a business leader, because these are challenging times. And what we want to do in this presentation is share with you what we've learned about all the things that are going on and the few things that we really need to pay attention to ensure that we're leading our companies in the right direction. Things are very much in flux. We don't exactly know how things are going to develop from here, but we do know some keys to success going forward, and that's what I want to share with you today. First, I want to thank and acknowledge the research team that was listed on this slide. These researchers come from MIT's Center for Information Systems Research, from our extended family of researchers, and from the Boston Consulting Group's Technology Advantage practice. So let's just think about what's going on right now, and here's how we look at it. First of all, companies have been disrupted by technology, and here's what it looks like. There's an evolution of technologies coming at us. These are social, mobile, analytics, cloud, the Internet of Things. We call this smack it. And we call it smack it because that's what it feels like. It feels like we're being hit aside the head by a constant barrage of technologies. And these technologies, interestingly, all by themselves, one at a time, are not a particularly big deal. They have come to us, we studied them as they arrived. So if you take social or mobile or analytics, when it appeared on the scene, we investigated the impacts and we concluded that all by itself, the technology was nice. It created some new opportunities, but to be honest, it was incremental. That in the end, it was still about being a great company, getting the basics right. And then you could take this new technology and you could make yourself a little more special. But somewhere along the way, that recommendation, that understanding of what was going on changed. What became clear is that it wasn't about these individual technologies. It was about the confluence of these technologies. And the confluence of these technologies has fundamentally changed the opportunities that are being created. It changes the way we think about doing business. And that's because they basically eliminated the technical limitations to how we run business. how much processing power we can use, how much data we can access. Those technology limitations are basically gone. We are now left with only human limitations, our ability to identify clever ways to use this technology, interesting things that our customers want from us, how we might best interact with computers and data to deliver more value to our customers. Those are going to be the sources of advantage going forward. The individual technologies are probably best described by the concept of readily accessible. These technologies are accessible to anyone who wants them. And it's not just the technology that's accessible, it's the vendors who make them powerful that are accessible. So anything you can just do with a technology will afford you no competitive advantage, because what it's going to do is just offer up a new idea that anybody can replicate. Your advantage is going to be from using this better than anyone else. And that, quite frankly, is about integration. Now, what do we do to actually take advantage of this? Interestingly, we would argue that the way companies are going about this is as follows. They recognize a new technology and they say, let's have a new strategy. So they introduce a mobile strategy, a big data strategy, a social media strategy, an Internet of Things strategy, a cloud strategy, a BYOD strategy, a biometric strategy, a cognitive computing strategy. This has been the inclination. But let me assure you, this is a bad idea. It is a bad idea, not technically, because it's a good idea to have technical experts on each of these technologies, especially if they're important to you. But it is a bad idea from a business perspective because you don't want a mobile strategy. That will not make you successful. In the end, what you want is a business strategy that integrates your capabilities using whatever technology makes the most sense to use. So you don't want these individual strategies, you want a digital strategy. Now, in order to understand that, let me share with you a couple definitions. First, let's talk about what digital disruption actually is. I would argue that digital disruption is the changes in the competitive environment that result from the use of digital technology, and this can be by either new market entrants, some of those startups we sometimes worry about, or established competitors, and those could be established competitors that were never actually your competitors before. And what they do is they undermine the viability of your product service portfolio or your go-to-market approach. In other words, they find ways to make your customers happier than you are by either offering them new kinds of relationships or a new product service portfolio. This will disrupt your business. What do you do about it? We argue that you need a digital strategy. That strategy needs to be integrated. It has to look across your enterprise at all the capabilities you have and then integrate them in a way that makes you special. That's your goal. And you'll notice you want to be thinking about all these readily accessible technologies, because if you don't, somebody else will. And then on top of it, you want to adopt the mindset of a startup in that you start to think about exactly what strategy is a little differently. You think of it as constantly responding to the changing market conditions. This means that our more traditional approach to strategy, where we might set targets, in fact, I would call this a target-setting strategy, where we decide what our earnings per share are going to be, or we decide what markets we're going to enter, or we decide what companies we're going to acquire. I would argue that is not strategy in the digital economy. What strategy is the defining of how we are going to make ourselves special. It is operational in nature. It is a discussion of who we are going to be and how we are going to deliver value to our customers. Now, that will be a challenge. The good news is that you get to choose from just 2 options. Here's the basics of digital strategy, and this is what we call our Mickey Mouse model. We call it Mickey Mouse only because it looks like Mickey Mouse, not because it is Mickey Mouse. There are actually 3 important things for you to understand about this model. First, you are going to pick one of 2 strategies. The customer engagement strategy says you are going to think about your relationship with your customer, and that relationship is going to be built on trust and loyalty. Ideally, it's built on passion. Take, for example, USAA. If you are a USAA customer, you are probably aware that on their website, people write things like, "I love my bank. I am never leaving my bank." Now, who writes things like that about their bank? Seriously. Or, more to the point, who wants to compete with a bank who has customers that feel that way? But USAA has promoted that kind of relationship. A number of years ago, they said, we're going to stop selling financial services products to customers. We are going to start serving their life events, like buying a car, buying a home, getting married, getting retired. These are their events that have financial implications, and we should make sure our members are well served, that we are there for them, that they have financial security. And as they started thinking that way, they started thinking about what a different approach that is to customers. So they started organizing around life events. So for example, if you want to buy a new car and you're a member of USAA, you can go to their auto circle capability and kind of walk through a process whereby they will help you pick out the car of your dreams. They will get you the best possible price for that through their buying service. They will help you finance it. They will get you insurance for it. You just print out the documentation and go pick up your car. That's the way they're going to do business with their members going forward. And all along, they are scanning the marketplace to see what newest technology has appeared and what it might mean for how they can serve you better. If you have homeowners insurance with USAA, their goal is to make sure you are the first person to get your check so that you can after a natural disaster, you will be the first person in your neighborhood with a check that lets you call a contractor and say, come fix the damage to my house. As they think about these things, they identify technologies that will make that easier. So now they're looking at drones. How will drones help them serve you faster? This is extraordinary customer engagement, and it is a strategy that guides their every action. If customer engagement is not your thing, perhaps digitized solutions is. Digitized solutions says, I'm not just thinking about the products and services I'm trying to sell. I'm thinking about my customers' needs and problems and how I can solve them. One of the most aggressive firms in this area has been GE. As they have moved away from financial services, they've moved back to their core competency around big assets, turbines, aircraft engines, medical equipment, and they're not just selling the asset. That's actually a rather risky thing to do because those are volatile. When the economy goes down, people stop investing. Instead, they're thinking about the owners of these assets. What do they need? Well, they need very effective management of these assets. They need for these assets to make them better. And as a result, they are looking for what GE is doing is looking for ways to service these assets, to help the companies manage them. So they're collecting data through an Internet of Things on just constant sensor data on the assets that their customers now own. And they are analyzing that data to find out how you use it most efficiently. They are providing either the management of the data itself or feedback on the way the customer is managing that data. so that the customer is constantly aware of how they get more value from this asset. And GE is thinking about this not just in terms of how they provide new services around asset performance management. They're thinking about a whole ecosystem of partners who will identify needs and then deliver on those needs for their customers. So they have more than a GE, which is a big enough company by itself. Beyond GE, there's a whole ecosystem of partners developing solutions. Now, as you think through which of these strategies works for you, what you'll want to think about is how you're going to make it work, because anybody can have a strategy. And here's where the operational backbone is so important. Our understanding of the operational backbone is that companies started doing this in the late 90s, early 2000s. They went out, they got ERPs, they got CRMs, they got product lifecycle management systems, they got HR systems. The idea was to become more efficient, to have end-to-end transactions, to make sure that they were well run. And so we've been building operational pipelines and backbones for a long time. Well, the moment has arrived when it's no longer optional, no longer just a good idea. At this point, what we need is a great operational backbone, because you cannot deliver on customer engagement or digitized solutions without it. Now, those of you who are familiar with Michael Tracy's 3 disciplines, you will see that reformulated here. He talked about customer intimacy, product leadership, operational excellence. Note what we're saying, operational excellence is not an option. It is table stakes. And because it's table stakes, if you don't have a great operational backbone, you need it now. What this operational backbone is going to do for you is ensure that you have seamless end-to-end transactions that are efficient, reliable, secure, predictable. And so you have not just great systems, but you have standardized processes in your company that are great. Then you reuse these as you enter new markets or create new products and services, and this backbone is totally reliable. It ensures that basic things do not go wrong. And because you have this backbone, you know every day that as you add new digital services, new interfaces with your customers, new solutions to their problems, they will work. And that is essential. It is, as I say, table stakes in the digital economy. Now, just to elaborate on this a bit, I want to talk about 2 companies and how they have developed their backbones and made them effective. The first one I'll talk about is Nordstrom's. Well, this is my favorite store, and there's a reason why it's my favorite store. It has for years been known for outstanding customer service. Now, the thing you should know about Nordstrom is that this company was born around 1901, so it's been around a long time. But it was born as a store, and what's happened over the years is it's been disrupted by the increasing popularity of online shopping. So here's this retailer known forever for great customer service, and suddenly it learns that its customers actually like to do some of their shopping online. Well, obviously, what's critical to Nordstrom is that you can get an online experience with Nordstrom that has all the features of great customer service that you get in the store. And that becomes their challenge. They become disrupted by online, and they address the challenge by saying, we will now simply extend the concept of our customer engagement. You'll notice this 2x2. They also felt disrupted somewhat, at least, by the popularity of off-price discount stores. And so what they have said is going forward, they are going to have full price and off-price, both online and in stores. Now this is what I call a target strategy. It is not their digital business strategy. Their digital business strategy is more like this. This is the way they articulate what they plan to do and who they plan to be. Their strategy is to provide a personalized, seamless experience across these 4 quadrants. And they have noted and this slide is taken directly from their investor presentation, they have noted that there are 3 things that will lead to this. One is service. They are never going to abandon their brand reputation that rests on great customer service. And to give you a sense of what it takes to deliver this, I want to introduce you to Maureen. I actually hate to shop. And about 2 years ago, I went to Nordstrom's because I got in the habit of shopping somewhere where at least they took care of me. I went with my 2 daughters who helped me pick out a number of items. And as I'm checking out, I say to the sales clerk, I'm so glad I brought my daughters because I can never decide what I should buy. And she said to me, oh, well, my name is Maureen. I am a personal shopper. If ever your daughters are not available, let me know. I will take care of you. I said, thank you very much. And then 18 months later, I needed some clothes and my daughters weren't around. And I said, wait a minute, what about Maureen? So I emailed Maureen. I said, Maureen, my name is Jeanne Ross. We met 18 months ago, and I need some clothes for a very professional event. I want to look professional, and I need some help. An hour and a half later, I got an email from Maureen that says, I have picked out some things I think you'll like. Stop by whenever it's convenient to try them on. Now, I said to myself, wait a minute, Maureen, shouldn't you be asking me my size and what I like? And then I realized Maureen knew. Maureen knew everything I'd ever bought at Nordstrom's. For all I know, she knew I had 2 daughters because she takes notes. So I arrive at the store. She says, here are the things you usually buy. Here are some other things you might want to consider. And you can pick and choose. And as I'm trying them on, she's learning where she doesn't have the right color, where she doesn't have the right size. And she is going to Nordstrom systems, and she is finding what I need so that by the time I emerge from the dressing room, they are already ordered and on their way. I will receive them the next day at my home. This is possible because of the capabilities that Nordstrom has created under Maureen. They have a totally transparent supply chain. When she needs a blouse in a different color or a different size, she simply goes to her system, learns where it is, and says, get it to this address by tomorrow, and it gets there. Notice that she is not limited to traditional warehouses. She is looking at every single inventory item at Nordstrom. And then what I learned when I got snowed in last winter is that same transparency is available to me as a Nordstrom customer. I can order things no matter where they exist at Nordstrom's. And what Nordstrom's is going to do is find that item and deliver it. I ordered 9 items. They arrived in 6 different packages from 6 different places, and that included individual stores. I know because they were still on the hanger and they had the price tag on them. When I want to return them, I go back to a Nordstrom store because, of course, I want to return 6 things, and that's a much easier way to return 6 things. And when I look for the service desk, it's gone. So, luckily, Maureen is there, and I say, Maureen, where's your service desk? And she says, that would be me. Let me return those for you. And then, of course, she can ask me if maybe I need something else that would serve me better than the item I am returning. So this is the whole philosophy at Nordstrom. The underlying capabilities that are in their operational pipeline are things like the transparent supply chain, the transparent supply chain, the customer information file. Maureen has everything she needs to provide me with extraordinary customer service. Just so you understand how this whole thing transpires, I want you to understand that I am showing you a chart that starts in 1998. But Nordstrom starts in 1901. So for 97 years, this company is nothing but a store or a set of stores. Then in 1998, they recognize the disruption and they say, we're taking that service reputation we have and we're taking it online. By 2007, they have built up that capability to such an extent that they now have multi-channel fulfillment and basically transparency into the supply chain. And then they really started getting excited. They said, look at all those social media tools. Look at all the mobility. Let's go after it. So in 2012, they introduced their iPhone app. In 2013, they have mobile checkout at their rack stores. By 2014, they're creating the customer experience around Pinterest. By 2015, they recognize the opportunities to sell through Instagram, and if you look at that list, all kinds of other things. In 2015, they are simply adding more and more capabilities around mobility, around social media, and notice that means that any kind of competitive advantage they built, they just keep putting on the pressure. If you are a competitor to Nordstrom right now, you have to run awfully hard to catch up. Nordstrom's concept is you won't. And notice, all this data in these mobile and social apps, that's real data. Now they can analyze that, they can learn their customers better, they can extend their transparent supply chain not just to all of what Nordstrom owns, they can extend it to partners. They haven't as far as I know, but notice what is possible because of the capabilities they've built. This is the power of a really great operational backbone with a clear strategy. Now, an alternative approach, as I mentioned, is digitized solutions. So let's talk about the Schindler Group. Now, this is an elevator company. The elevator company in this case is one of the four big ones. Now, Schindler isn't really being disrupted, to tell you the truth. Their other three major competitors are also really interested in digital. But what they are identifying is the opportunity to disrupt what has been a permanent annoyance for the major elevator companies. And those are all the thousands of small service providers that after Schindler goes through all the trouble of installing an elevator, these little guys come around and they want to get generate the ongoing revenue from maintenance. Now, of course, Schindler doesn't want them to do that. They want that revenue. And here's their opportunity. They start to recognize that they are no longer wanting to sell just an elevator and escalator, or even just the elevator, the escalator, and the maintenance of that. They want to sell ongoing great performance of an elevator and an escalator. This is their goal. Now, they too thought this through, and they said, here's what it's going to look like. First, we have built up this capability over the years. So around 2005, they said, we got to clean it up. We have to be the best. And so they started identifying the processes they used for their thousands of technical assistants, technicians who service the elevators. And they said, we have to do everything we can so they can be as efficient as they can possibly be. And so they do this by building what they called SHAPE, which is their underlying operational backbone. And this basically started with just an ERP. They start with an ERP, and they said what we learned by basically following technicians around is it's a tough job to do well. There are many, many versions of our elevators. They come out with new elevators all the time. And so when an elevator goes bad, they have to figure out which generation elevator it is, what kind of parts it uses, what kinds of things tend to go wrong, what kinds of parts probably have to be replaced. There is a lot. And then when they figure out the part, they have to find it in our catalog, which is massive. So the first thing we have to do for these technicians is come up with a simpler catalog that lets them use an iPad or an iPhone or some simple technology that just lets them pick the item that we can help them pick out. Over time, they just incrementally improve this. They go from helping them pick out the item to getting more and more sensor data that helps them diagnose what's likely to be wrong with the elevator. Then they diagnose what part is most likely to be needed. And most recently in Switzerland, they actually say, now that we figured out what parts you most likely need, we will have a partner of ours deliver it to your trunk, the trunk of your car, technician, so that basically you can just tell the company you will arrive in the morning and you will fix their problem. Obviously, they can build on this. Now they can tell customers more and more as the elevator breaks before the customer even figures it out. They can tell them that the elevator is broken and that it will be fixed by a given point in time. And as they collect more and more sensor data, they'll do an even better job of identifying the possibility of the elevator breaking down and alerting them to the need for service before it breaks down. But that is just the beginning. That is operational excellence. From there, where they want to go is to recognize that they could be the urban mobility solutions provider. That's the digital strategy, and that's about going beyond providing elevators. And it started with the port technology that many of you have probably seen. The port technology says, I'm not going to have these people get in an elevator and pick a floor and then hope it's an efficient ride. We're going to tell the people what elevator to go to get to their floor the fastest. And then they said, well, we can go beyond that. When somebody's visiting one of our customers, we can actually set it up so that the visitor does not have to stop at the visitor's desk. Rather, they can be authorized on their mobile phone to go straight through the security system, right over to the port technology, just scan their phone and be told what elevator to get into to get to their host's appropriate floor. And then they can move on to things like, well, if we get things more and more efficient within the building, what are the possibilities beyond? How do we get you to your subway ride, your bus, whatever it is you need next? How do we connect that so that we're not only moving 1 billion people a day, which is what they do, we are moving 1 billion people a day as efficiently as they can be moved through any urban environment. It's quite a goal. So that is where we are with digital strategy. Now, I want to just pause a moment and ask you to think about, what's your digital strategy? So we'll have a little poll here where I ask you to tell me what works, what do you think will work for your company? Will it be digitized solutions? Will it be customer engagement? Both? Neither? Can I ask you to just pick one of those 4 options and give us a sense of what's going on out there in the minds of the people who are participating? Okay, Jeanine, can we see the results of the poll? Well, there we have it. Oh dear, 61.5% of you have chosen both. Oh my goodness, this is a disaster. Shall I explain why? It turns out the single most important thing you have to do with your strategy is focus. If you decide you are going to do both, you will succeed at neither. Let me make clear that if you go for customer engagement, it's not that you can't digitize any solutions. Indeed, you must. But you have to understand what the thrust of your strategy is, or you will build 2 separate and competing strategies right within your company. If you choose digitized solutions, you absolutely must deliver those solutions in a way that works for your customers. But if you don't decide whether you're going to focus on the great design of solutions, you are going to be creative, you are going to do things no one ever imagined before, much as Apple has done, then you have not decided at all. You simply don't have a strategy. Think about what Apple has done. They have amazing customer engagement, right? But it is very clear where Apple is coming from. Apple has decided to have amazing products that solve their customers' problems. And so they are going to get that out there, and then they are going to make that very easy to use, very nice to go to an Apple store. But this is driven by the product. It is not driven by the customer engagement. You go to USAA, and they will tell you they want to have extraordinary products, but it will be driven by the engagement. If they can't figure out how to engage the customer, they won't produce the product. These are different strategies that in the end actually enrich both sides. But you need to declare the winner before the fight begins. You have to know what is going to dominate your strategy. One example of this being done brilliantly has been done by Federal Express and UPS. UPS went after package data and package efficiency, delivery efficiency, from the beginning. Federal Express went after customer relationships, do whatever the customer needs. If you look at these two companies today, they do not look that different. They respond to one another's competitive moves. But you'll notice that they have decimated DHL because they were both so good at their strategy. It did allow them to respond to one another. So let me just urge you to be serious about actually picking a strategy. Do not do what we all want to do, which is to say, well, one of these will do. I mean, both of them are necessary. It is true enough. It just doesn't work. Pick which strategy is more important. Okay? So we have just a few more minutes, and I want to just lay one more thing on you. And that is that after you've picked the strategy, after you've identified what is critical in your operational backbone and really cleaned it up, you will need one more thing, and that is your digital services backbone. What we learn is that as Nordstrom collects all this social data, as it collects more and more public data, as GE collects data from its sensors, they have to do things with data they've never had to do before. Analyzing big data, processing big data, staying connected, extending their ecosystem, and this requires an agility that an operational backbone does not give you. So you can add things to your operational backbone, but at some point in time, you will need a new backbone, and that is what we're calling the digital services backbone. The digital services backbone will give you the agility, it will give you the power to analyze enormously big data about your product and services or about your customers. It's an analytics engine, it's a processor, it's a way of connecting to your ecosystem. This is going to be the next thing. I will admit to you, we don't completely understand the digital services backbone because companies are so early in developing this. We do know that it has to be aligned with or connected to the operational backbone so that you can still complete your transactions in a seamless way. So we know this is really important. And we know there are things like the GE Predix Cloud, and that is how they're going to basically store all their services. And there are people will go to the store and meet the needs of their customer by picking services that work for them. So the digital services backbones are going to emerge. We can tell you that the essence of that backbone will be connectivity, it will be reusable services like authentication, it will be capabilities like big analytics and powerful data storage. But we do think this will emerge a little differently for every company, and this is what you need to be thinking about. If you don't have a digital if you don't have an operational backbone, you really have to get that in place first. You have to become operationally excellent. But this is what you should be thinking about as you start to recognize the limitations of these solid platforms that you put in and their inability to adapt to more product-driven strategies or more customer engagement-driven strategies. So this is what we've learned. Let me just tell you that what's going to happen now is you're going to have to recognize that it's a new world out there. In the pre-digital economy, we designed our companies for efficiency. And this meant we could take a divide and conquer approach. So we could have our functional leaders or our line of business leaders focus in on their business and do a great job. This will not work in the digital economy. In the digital economy, what we need to do is design for agility. That's about empower, collaborate, synchronize, partner, in a word, integrate. And that is hard. The fact that it's hard is what makes it possible to gain competitive advantage from it. So we would urge you to think about how you're going to pull this off. I would tell you that the digital strategy part of this is actually the easy part. Executing that strategy is going to be hard. So to do this, think about your challenge like this. Going forward, you're going to try to build a solid, integrated, operational backbone, and then also develop a loosely coupled set of services that comprise the capabilities of your digital services backbone. And you will do that while implementing a clearly articulated but constantly evolving digital business strategy. I appreciate that this is an extraordinary challenge, and it's what makes these times so exciting. I think my time is up. I want to hand the floor back over to Peter. So let me wish you well with that. We will continue to do research in this area. So please feel free to follow us at http://scissor.mit.edu. And we hope you'll stay in touch with us. We look forward to following your journey with you.
Thank you very much, Jeanne. This is fascinating, and we have some time now that you've generally set aside to take some questions. We've had many coming in already. Please do feel free to keep asking questions on the site, and I will try to sample some and pass them on to Jeanne. So just to get us started, perhaps, I was interested in the poll that we just did earlier on, that not only did 61.5% of people, according to you, choose a rather fated approach to their business strategy, 0.4% said neither. Is that, do you think, realistic?
Actually, the 0.4% is probably right, because we have observed some industries where operational excellence is still plenty. Yeah, those industries are behind. I'm tempted to name one, but I don't want to offend anyone, so I'm just going to say, you probably know, if you are in industry where operational excellence has been a struggle and any improvement in your operations affords you some competitive advantage. I actually think those companies are not well advised to be too aggressive in the digital services piece. I think go after operational excellence if that's all it takes in the short term. You just have to keep your eyes open, because someday you're going to wake up and you're going to say, oh, look, one of my competitors is doing really cool things for their customers that has now made them passionate.
Right. And perhaps that's one of the alternative definitions of radical disruption, that somebody's going to use a digital capability to come in and have a very big impact on something that appears to be a very sustainable business model. I
think that's exactly right. And I know some people are saying, well, I just don't think you're helping me recognize the thing that's going to totally disrupt me. And I would disagree, actually, with that. I think if we say we are going to have the most amazing products, and then we make sure we are constantly scanning and understanding what products are available, we're going to be fine. there shouldn't be any surprises if we're really paying attention. And the same thing on the customer engagement side. If that's what we're going after, how could we possibly be caught asleep if we are connecting with those customers all the time? So I think it's a bad job of delivering on what you're saying. I do not think it is possible to be caught unawares if, in fact, you are connecting on one of those two dimensions.
Does it matter whether you think of your business being in a B2C or a B2B space? And historically, we've often thought that those are very different business models and require very different strategies. As I listen to these ideas, it seems like they're kind of merging almost, because even in the B2B space, the concepts you're talking about seem like they would be relevant.
Yeah, it's really interesting. As we were studying this phenomenon, one thing we learned is that it's no longer B2B or B2C, it's B2B2C or B2B to B2C. And so what we're identifying is all those different layers of customers we have. We do find that there is a tendency for B2C companies to favor the customer engagement strategy, and for B2B to favor digitized solutions. I think there's a logic to that, but I definitely think companies should not feel constrained that way. They definitely do need to know who their customers are, so the B2B, B2B2C, B2C, all those things are still relevant, but I think this idea of digital customer engagement and digitized solutions is another thing they need to think hard about.
And what about sectorially or in different industries? We have a few questions coming in from people saying something like, oh, I'm in manufacturing, what does this mean for me?
Yeah.
What do you see about that? Is there any particular lessons?
Well, there are certainly tendencies. So if you're a big asset company now, it looks like you are headed towards digitized solutions. If you're financial services, there's a tendency towards customer engagement. But I would encourage individuals to think about whether that is important for them, because we have, for example, seen a company like iGuarantee, which is a bank, say, no, we're going to redefine banking. We're not going to think of ourselves as the provider of mortgages and loans and checking accounts. We're going to think of ourselves as your financial advisor, and we're going to be at your side, and we're going to tell you when your favorite stores have sales, and we're going to tell you when you're spending more than you should. And so we're going to rethink banking for you, and I think they've taken very much a digitized solutions approach. One could argue that. But I think that there's a tendency, and then it's worth disrupting that by saying, well, let's make sure that's where we belong.
Interesting. That leads actually to what seems to be one of the most asked questions that we're getting today, which is, if we accept this premise, how do we choose which of these strategies is right for our company? From your research, could you see what the companies that have been successful had in common that enabled them to make a good choice? Any tools?
Yeah, so I think actually there's a couple. Hopefully you've built capabilities over the years, and I think the companies that are in the biggest trouble are the ones that say, well, can't think of any really. Those companies are in trouble, and they can probably pick either strategy. It does not matter. They just have to get started. But I think you will tend to look at your capabilities. So, I mean, it would have been crazy for Nordstrom's or USAA or Kaiser Permanente to say, well, let's see, why don't we do digitized solutions? When what they're known for right now is their ability to understand the needs of their customers and just understand them better than anybody else, to have built up that trust. Why would they do anything but just say, we are going after it? And if you have great engineers and you have hired them and they are great, why would you suddenly say, hey, wouldn't it be fun to do customer engagement? So I think most companies are going to look at what's in place and they're going to say, this is where we belong. Now we just have to leverage it. We have to make it stronger. And if you look at your operational pipeline, I think it is going to indicate for you where you're stronger. If your operational backbone is weak, then I think this is where you're more comfortable committing. Where do you think you've got the talent or could get the talent? And interestingly, I kind of look at the two strategies and say, it's not picking the right one that matters, it's delivering on it. And so whichever one you pick, and get past it, right? Pick one and move. Just make sure you do this better than anybody else. And that is your challenge. So it's not the picking. I don't think it's the picking. It's about, once you've picked, make sure everybody's on board. You are defining every day what that means. You have a vision, and you are evolving that vision over time.
That makes sense. So let's say assume that we can do that, and you talk a little bit there about some companies might be facing a situation where they don't even feel they have the strong operational backbone yet, and yet they need presumably to work very quickly to build a digital backbone. Can they do this in parallel?
We actually don't know the answer to that question. They probably will be forced to, so it is suboptimal, but depending on their industry. I mean, again, if your industry is nowhere on operational excellence, I would say you don't have to and you shouldn't. Go after the operational excellence. But if you are in an industry where you're looking at your competitors and you're going, oh my goodness, there they go into digital services, you probably have to go there with them. I would certainly get help. I mean, there are great vendors out there. So go after the software as a service companies. Stop thinking about building internal technology capabilities. Put all of your attention onto changing the culture, the understanding of what a standardized process is, why it is important, how you reuse it. Get all of your management bandwidth on that and bring in partners to take care of the other part of this for you. They're very good at that. The partners are brilliant at that, but they cannot change your culture, and that's what you should be spending your time doing.
Well, it's very interesting that you should finish on that note, because we've been getting a lot of questions about that as well, which is people pointing out that this is all very well to talk about technology, but ultimately we need people, whether they're our customers, but in particular our employees, to be able to make these kinds of changes. So the questions really come in three kinds: is how do people need to change? How do we achieve that? And actually, what does it mean that we need of our leaders?
Yes. Oh my gosh, those are great questions. I guess the two magic words appear to be user design, and that can mean so many things, but I'm struck by some of the things that Schindler described when they said we were making our technicians' lives easier. And my question for them, of course, is, I bet they didn't really like this, right? Didn't they find this miserable? Didn't they say, I don't want to touch that piece of technology? And their answer was no. They were very happy. They loved it. And at first you think, they were just being naive. Here's why that worked. Because they sat with these people. They went on the job with them. They watched their struggle. And they said, so if we could do this for you, does your life become easier? And they said, oh my goodness, yes. Oh yes, it becomes easier. So this is what they're trying to deliver. And I would argue that that's the way we need to think about it. Not off in some other room we say, I know what the process ought to be, but rather with the people who are doing the work. And I think if we get our heads around it, that's the way we have to design processes. We need to understand the people who are already doing them, and how do they make things easier. I think this is very doable. It's just that's not the way we've tended to do things in companies. So we think about user design.
So you have people, you meet people who attend our executive education programs. They come as individuals. You've also worked with some companies to really help them to think through, develop their strategies, and then implement and execute. You talked about the importance of strategy execution.
Yeah.
Are there any sort of what people should be thinking about next? I see that we've just put up some featured reading, for example.
Sorry.
It happened by magic. But as we're just sort of drawing towards our closing remarks here, what could people be thinking that they should really do with this? Let's say you've got them very excited that they need to do something. What on earth do they do?
So here's the thought I would leave everyone with. How do you become an evidence-based person? And ideally, every company needs to adopt this culture, but I actually think that every single person can take responsibility for this. Now, our inclination is to say, well, I just don't have good enough data. I can't be evidence-based because I don't have the data. But take that a step further. What data is it you don't have? And what would it take to get it? Just ask for it. What we find is companies are growing this analytics platform and analytics capability and bringing in data scientists, and nobody actually knows what data they want and what kind of analytics they care about and what they're going to do with those insights when they get them. And if every single person starts thinking that through, you actually can start to foster that culture throughout the company by asking the right kinds of questions, by pointing out what's possible. But when something goes wrong, our tendency is to find someone to blame. When something goes wrong, say, I'm going to own that problem because I want to fix it. I don't care whose fault it was. I think if I have certain kinds of data or certain kinds of empowerment, I can fix that problem, and here's what I need. I think every individual can own that, and people in leadership positions can encourage that. And I think that's really step one. We have to become evidence-based.
So data-driven, solution-oriented, and empowering people.
Easy.
That sounds very good. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jeanne Ross. This has been fascinating on behalf of the thousands of people who signed up for this webinar. As we're drawing this segment to a close, I would just like to also remind everybody that I mentioned earlier, Dr. Jeanne Ross does teach in some of our executive education programs on these themes, and if you're in a large company that has thousands of people who you would like to get this word out to as well, please do feel free to get in touch with us and talk about that. And we're now moving, I think, into the Facebook chat. If we could push the next slide, please, component of this experience. So we'll say goodbye to everyone who has to leave us now from the voice webinar and be moving over to the Facebook chat. You should get a link pushed up on your page right now. So please, I hope many of you will be able to join us and continue this fascinating conversation. And thank you all, and thank you once again, Dr. Jeanne Ross.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. And you should see the link to the Facebook discussion with Dr. Ross appeared on your screen. We hope you found this webcast presentation informative. This concludes our program, and you may now disconnect. Have a good day.